Iran's key nuclear enrichment facilities have been completely and totally obliterated.
When this president speaks, the world should listen.
Your bold decision to target Iran's nuclear facilities with the awesome and righteous might of the United States will change history.
It is an outrageous, grave, and unprecedented violation of the fundamental principles of the Charter of the United Nations.
Will you strike the Iranian nuclear component? And what time exactly, sir? Sir, would you strike it? Would you please inform us so we can be there and watch? I mean, you don't know that I'm going to even do it. You don't know. I may do it, I may not do it. I mean, nobody knows what I'm going to do. I can tell you this, that Iran's got a lot of trouble.
Israel's position on this is they're saying that they had no choice, that in the last few months, they believe Iran was accelerating towards building a nuclear weapon, that the talks, the negotiations in Muscat and Rome between US and Iranian negotiators about a deal to curb Iran's program were going nowhere, that Iran was stringing the US along, and that therefore this was the last resort, that they see an existential threat from Iran towards Israel, that if Iran acquired a nuclear weapon, it would use it because it has previously vowed to destroy the state of Israel. That is not a view shared by the rest of the region, and it's not necessarily shared by the International Atomic Energy Agency, that's the UN nuclear watchdog, nor indeed is it shared by the last open source report we have seen from US intelligence, which did not say that Iran was about to produce a nuclear weapon.
Fordo is about 200 kilometers south of Tehran. It's one of two critical enrichment facilities that Iran has. It's very much been built in a mountainous region. And the reason for that obviously is protection. And it basically is one of the key enrichment facilities that Iran have been using to get uranium-235, which is the isotope, up to 60%. Now 60% is a key figure because the IAEA report in May basically stated that enrichment purity was up to 60%. 90% is the key weapons grade metric, so they're not quite there, but it's not a big jump between 60 and 90. Now, Fordo has been struck by the IDF already. However, it's believed that the airstrikes were going after surface-to-air missile systems and air defense capability around it in order to make it more vulnerable.
Iran's supreme leader, he is the head of the state. He is the religious figure, but he has a lot of power, much bigger than what a country's president can have. He is considered as the commander and chief of staff of armed forces, and he is a decision maker for major decisions that should be made in the country, including negotiations with the US. He is the one that he would give green light to diplomats and foreign ministry that they can go ahead and speak with the US over a nuclear program. Iran has witnessed massive protest only 2 years ago against the regime. It was a mass protest, it was widespread, and people were, especially youths and women, participated in that protest, asking their rights, the freedom and social freedom mainly, and also some wanted the end of this regime. But we cannot ignore that this regime still has its own roots and its own supporters. The percentage is not really clear, but the issue is that majority of armed forces are connected to the regime, and they are still supporting the regime because they receive their power from the regime. But people inside, I think the youths, they want new life. That can tell you that probably the majority of youth don't want this regime.
Last week, on the 12th of June, he said, if not stopped, Iran could have a nuclear weapon in a very short time, within a year or maybe a few months. That's what he said last week. In 2018, he said, Iran has the wherewithal to do it very quickly. In 2015, he said, they are weeks away from having an entire arsenal of nuclear bombs. In 2012, he said, they're close, 6 months away from having enough enriched uranium to have an atomic bomb. In 2006, Iran is gearing up to having 25 atomic bombs a year. In 1996, Netanyahu told US lawmakers, ladies and gentlemen, time is running out. And in 1995, he said Iran is capable of creating nuclear bombs between 3 105 years.
Iran says their intentions are entirely peaceful, that their nuclear program is for civil use, for power generation. Israel clearly doesn't believe them. Some of their actions have aroused suspicion, not just in Israel, but also countries like the UK and others. But you're absolutely right to list that. You know, there is an accusation here that Israel, or at least Benjamin Netanyahu, has been crying wolf with this. Now, there was a deal, let's not forget, something called the JCPOA. This was the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action. It was the crowning glory of President Obama's foreign policy. And it was concluded in 2015, also called the Vienna Nuclear Deal, which, in return for the partial lifting of sanctions on Iran, it put in place some very strict inspections by UN nuclear inspectors inside Iran, and Donald Trump pulled the US out of it. Iran waited a year and then said, okay, you know what? If they're not going to take part, then nor are we. So they broke a lot of the protocols. Now, very importantly, about a week ago, the IAEA, that's the UN's nuclear watchdog, the International Atomic Energy Agency, pronounced that Iran was in breach of its non-proliferation obligations. That is not the same as saying they are about to produce a nuclear weapon.
I think the three-tier layered defense system that Israel has is absolutely vulnerable. We know that after the October strikes by overwhelming ballistic missile attacks from Iran, actually the Israeli Defense Force had to restock their silos. On the outer defense, you've got two missiles called Arrow 2 and Arrow 3. Their range goes out to about 2,400 kilometers, and that's the first line of defense, if you like. That's what the IDF will be hoping will take out the majority of the ballistic missile threat from Iran. The inner bit is called David Sling, that goes out to about 300 kilometers. And then from about 4 to 70 kilometers, you have what's called the Iron Dome as we know it. That's the Tamir missile system. It's got 3 to 4 launchers per battery, 20 missiles per launcher, so that's 60 to 80. But they can be overwhelmed quite quickly. One of the big things about all of this is Iran has what's called a Fatah 2 hypersonic missile. That has what's called a hypersonic glide vehicle. That means the warhead, when it separates from the main rocket itself, at Mach 5, which is 5 times the speed of sound, that can actually maneuver. They can maneuver that. And so that's going to be really, really difficult and provide problems for that three-tiered layered defense system to be able to counter. And the whole system itself has around an 85 to 90% success rate. So 10% will get through. And with these hypersonic missiles, that's probably going to attrit that even more. From the US or from the IDF, it's all about threat. You know, going back to that probability versus consequence and capability versus intent. And I think in measuring that threat from Iran, when you're looking at, you know, what is the risk of them having a nuclear capability, intent may be one thing, but capability is definitely other. The peaceful part of enriching uranium to give it a energy supply, for example, that's about 3 to 5%. So when the IAEA come out with a report saying that they've got enriched uranium up to 60%, the big question is going to be, well, why have you got that? And what are you planning on doing with that in terms of that risk assessment? People might look at Israel and go, well, even if they did have nuclear weapons, and the estimate is they've got about 90 nuclear warheads, the risk would be significantly less, this is my opinion, of them using any form of capability, because obviously that would involve many conversations with the US administration as well. So, but it's a fantastic point you raise, is, you know, why should one have and why should the other not? But Saudi Arabia have come out, MBS has come out, he's spoken about the potential of a nuclear capability with Iran. And there's also the very real possibility that if Iran is allowed to develop that, then it would start some form of nuclear arms race inside the Middle East, and Saudi would pursue a similar sort of nuclear capability itself.